Vampires. Just the word makes you think of sharp teeth, dark nights, and creepy stories. But what if some of those scary tales weren't just made up? What if history holds tales about serial killers who acted just like the vampires we see in books and movies? In this video, we're going on a wild journey through time to meet 7 spooky figures, some of which you've probably heard of. In Hungary, a countess bathed in blood to stay young forever. In Germany, a killer who bit the throats of his victims. In Barcelona, a woman who harvested blood from young victims. These are not campfire stories. These are the chilling tales of real people whose deeds place them squarely into the lore of the undead. And here's the twist. We're also going to compare these serial killers to fictional vampires. Could their stories have inspired characters like Dracula, Carmilla, or even the Lost Boys? Or were these people just so strange that their actions created their own legends? Let's get to it. First is Elizabeth Bathory, the Blood Countess. Elizabeth Bathory, known as the Blood Countess, has one of the creepiest stories in history. People say she believed that blood could keep her young and beautiful forever. According to the legend, she didn't just drink it, she bathed in it. The story goes that she collected the blood of over 300 young women and used it in her baths, thinking it was like a magical fountain of youth. Does bathing in blood remind you of a movie? Well, it reminds us of the scene in Blade 2, where the ancient vampire Damaskino sits in a tub of blood to stay revitalized. Just like him, Bathory's legend is all about using blood to stay strong and keep going. But they weren't just drinking or sucking it from their victims. They were additionally bathing in their victims' blood. Whether it's true or not, Bathory's story has become one of the most famous vampire-like tales ever told. She was arrested, put on trial, and imprisoned before dying in 1614. Second, Fritz Haarmann, Vampire of Hanover. Fritz Haarmann, nicknamed the Vampire of Hanover, had a way of attacking his victims that reminded people of vampires, for you see, he would bite his victims' necks. And that's just the beginning. What made Haarmann even more dangerous was how he hid in plain sight. In the 1920s Hanover, Germany, Haarmann worked as a police informant, which means he worked closely with authorities. Because of this, people didn't suspect him, and it gave him the perfect cover to hide what he was really doing. In some vampire stories, there are characters who use their jobs to blend in with humans. For example, in the Twilight series, Dr. Carlisle Cullen is a vampire who works as a doctor. His job makes him seem kind and trustworthy, hiding the fact that he's not human. Also, in the TV show Being Human, a vampire named Mitchell works at a hospital. His job keeps him close to blood and makes him look like a normal person. Like these vampires, Haarmann used his job to make sure nobody suspected him. It's a creepy reminder of how scary stories sometimes borrow ideas from real-life events. Third is Peter Kürten, Vampire of Dusseldorf. Peter Kürten was called the Vampire of Dusseldorf. He victimized many people, and what scared everyone the most was that he sometimes drank their blood, like a vampire. This is why he was given such a creepy nickname. In the end, he was caught and punished for his crimes in 1931, but his story is one of the scariest in real life. Here's the thing, when Peter was a child, his life was very hard. He grew up in a poor family, and his father was abusive and hurt him a lot. This made Peter very sad and angry. As he got older, he started to hurt animals and later people. Peter's story is a little like Sam's from the TV show Van Helsing. You might have to be a die-hard vampire fan to know this show, which was originally from Sci-Fi and now on streaming. I'm also a big fan of the actor, Christopher Heyerdahl, and was delighted he played the character. You see, Sam also had a rough childhood. His dad hurt him badly, and this left Sam deaf and feeling very lonely. Just like Peter, Sam grew up to hurt others. When Sam became a vampire on the show, his violent side got even worse, and he became very dangerous. Maybe there's something about hard and painful childhood leading someone down a very dark path. Fourth is Richard Chase, the Vampire of Sacramento. Richard Chase, known as the Vampire of Sacramento, was a serial killer who victimized people in shocking ways, and he even drank their blood, which is why people compared him to a vampire. According to authorities, Richard's crimes were wild and out of control. He was arrested on January 27, 1978, after killing 6 people in Sacramento, California. He was sent to prison and sentenced to death, but he didn't stay there long. On December 26, 1980, Richard died in jail after taking his own life. Richard's story reminds me somewhat of Stefan Salvatore from the Vampire Diaries TV show. Stefan had a dark side called the Ripper of Monterey. It just so happens that Monterey and Sacramento are both cities in Northern California, which is another reason why Richard's crimes remind me of Stefan. Even though we didn't see Stefan's Ripper side in the show, it was referenced often enough that we understood the chaos and destruction he left behind. 5th is Bela Kiss. First, that's a cool name. Second, the Stash. Wow. So anyways, Bela Kiss was a Hungarian serial killer in the early 1900s. He had a body count of at least 24 victims, most of them women. He lured them by placing ads in newspapers pretending to be someone looking for love or offering to tell fortunes. Women who wanted help or romance would visit him at his house. He'd then victimize them, and then he drained their blood, just like a vampire. But what made his story even creepier is that he kept their bodies in big metal barrels filled with a special liquid for preservation. He pickled the bodies as claimed by authorities. And oh, by the way, he was never caught. Now, I find Bela Kiss's story like Jerry Dandridge from the movie Fright Night. Jerry was a vampire who tricked women into coming to his house. He used his charm to make them trust him, but then feed on them. Jerry even kept his victims hidden in his basement, just like Bela used his barrels. 6th is Enriqueta Martí, Vampire of Barcelona. Enriqueta Martí was a serial killer who lived in Spain in the early 1900s. She kidnapped children from poor areas and victimized them in horrible ways. For you see, she had a business catering to the elites. She told her clientele that her potions and salves would cure diseases or keep them looking young. Unknown to her customers, the ingredients included blood, fat, and bones from her victims. This is how she came to be known as the Vampire of Barcelona. She was caught in 1912, but she didn't go to trial because other prisoners unalived her before she could. Enriqueta's harvesting of blood from victims reminds me of the 2009 vampire movie Daybreakers. In it, the vampires used blood farms with live humans as blood sources. They were harvesting blood too, but in a much larger quantity. In simplistic terms, these blood farms to me are a modernized industrial version of what Enriqueta was doing. 7th is Auguste Delagrange. Last on this list is Auguste Delagrange, a serial killer from Louisiana in the early 1900s who people believed might be a vampire. He murdered over 40 people, but what gave him the vampire reputation was that no blood was ever found on his victims. Because of this, people started to think he wasn't just an ordinary criminal. In the end, Delagrange was unalived in a way straight out of vampire stories. For you see, someone used a stake and drove it through his heart. A very common trope in vampire tales. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoy the video. Which serial killer do you think is the creepiest? Tell us in the comments.